Okay, welcome to Psych 236, Developmental Psychology. Today we're talking about Chapter 17, and it is Emerging Adulthood, Biosocial Development. Okay, so it's a lot of the biological stuff, but also with the impact of the social environment. And it's Emerging Adulthood. Basically, it's the age of 18 to about 25, which is called Emerging Adulthood. Not considered full adulthood yet. Emerging, you're becoming adults because a lot of people still don't act like adults during this period of time, but we'll talk about that. This is what we're going to talk about. We're going to define what emerging adulthood is. We're going to talk about growth and strength. We're going to talk about sex, psychopathology problems, psychological problems. We're talking about risk-taking and drug use. So let's define emerging adulthood. What is emerging adulthood? It's a period of time between the ages of 18 and 25. It's not widely thought of as a separate developmental stage. In the past, it was just after age 18, okay, it's adulthood. Now we know that the period of 18 to 25, you're basically young adults. And you still, to some extent, behave like teenagers, but you're also a bit different. Okay, so it's called emerging adulthood. Millions of young people now linger between entering full adulthood. Millions of people basically are still acting not very much like adults during this time. And I went through that period of time, and I can concur, yes, that you are still not as responsible as you should be during this time. And you engage in other things that are usually not so typical of adulthood. So let's talk about growth and strength first. This is a period of time when basically you're about as tall as you're going to be, and you're about as strong as you're going to be. So emerging adults have very strong and very active bodies. Okay, emerging adults are usually in good health. This is usually when you're at your best health. This is when you have the most stamina. This is when you're the strongest, usually when you're the healthiest, right? This is emerging adulthood. Traditionally, ages 18 to 25 were a time for hard physical work in childbearing, but things have changed, okay? But in the past, yes, when you graduated from high school, you got a job and you got married and you had kids, and that's what you did. And you worked hard back then because it was mostly physical labor. Now we have a bunch of different types of jobs. You don't have to beat yourself up physically anymore. And a lot of people may not even have a job at this time, but that's what it used to be in the past. Hard physical work, physical labor, and a time to have kids. Physical work and parenthood are no longer expected of every young adult in the 20th century. You're no longer expected to have kids during this time or to necessarily have a job. You could still be in college and graduate school, but it is the time when your body is the strongest, the healthiest, and when you're best able to do those things, when you're best able to work hard physically, and the best time also to have children, as you'll find out in a moment. So because of food availability, most emerging adults have reached their full height, during this stage. Girls reach their full height, females reach their full height by about age 16. Males usually by about age 18. There are exceptions, of course. You can still grow, a little bit beyond age 18, but most people have achieved their full height by then. Females can also grow until age 18. It just depends. But usually girls reach their full height sooner than boys. Okay. Muscle growth and fat accumulation has continued in the early 20s, right? It continues, right? Women attain full breast size and hip size during this period of time, 18 to 25. You're going to get some more fat around your hips, around your breasts, right? And you'll look a little bit fuller. Okay. Men reach full shoulder width and upper arm strength during this time, right? When you really have those broad shoulders and when you're going to get as strong as you're going to be. Max strength occurs at about age 25. Okay, that's when you're as strong as you're going to be physically. And if you play sports, yeah, I mean, this is the time when you should be pretty damn good. Okay, professional athletes, I mean, nowadays some can even start let's say the NBA, like when they're 18 or early 20s, they're in top physical condition, but they may need some experience. By about the time they're 25, they're about as good as they're going to be. As strong as they're going to be, they're still fast, they still have a lot of stamina. After that, they can get some more experience, but physically, you know, you're going to begin to decline by about around age 27, mid-20s, around there. Okay. And you won't notice it really, the decline around that time, but you're about at your peak during this time. If you're a professional athlete, around 25, you have experience and you still have peak physical condition. So that's when you're at your best. Death from disease occurs rarely during this time. People don't die very much from disease during this time. They can die from other things, okay? Like car accidents and doing stupid things like taking drugs and things like that, but not so much from disease. Most people are pretty healthy. There are some people who can still die from disease, but most people do not. More about growth and strength. There are protective functions that are kind of at their peak during this time. You have organ reserve. This is the capacity of organs to allow the body to cope with stress via extra unused functioning ability, right? Like for instance, most of the time you don't really run that fast. Most of you probably don't even run at all, okay? But if there should be an emergency, somebody, let's say, wants to stab you or somebody wants to do something to you, you're gonna run and you'll find out that you can run faster and last longer than you thought you could, because you have this organ reserve. It's like this extra capacity, this extra ability that you have. You usually don't use it, but during a time of strength or during a time when you really push yourself, you really challenge yourself, you'll see that you'll have this extra organ reserve. I use it more often. I go jogging and I'll take off into the hills and I'll go out there. I'll be out there for, you know, for like an hour and a half and I'll do like 10 miles. So I do use that extra organ reserve quite frequently, right? But you can do more than you think you can, but usually you don't use this extra ability. Okay, unless you're an athlete, then you can really push yourself. I'm not an athlete, I just go jogging once in a while. Okay, yeah, I started jogging again. You know, I had that accident with my bike and I broke a few ribs. So I've kind of given that up for a while. I've just healed completely. I'm finally at the point where I have no more pain, even when I stretch. But I'm jogging, I'm doing stuff that's a little bit safer. Who knows if I'll take up bike riding in the future again, but right now I want to stay off of that. Homeostasis is the adjustment of all the body's systems to keep physiological functions in a state of equilibrium. Homeostasis is basically your body trying to adjust to demands. Simply, it could be, you know, like basically your body just trying to get enough oxygen when you're jogging, right? And you're gasping for air. If you're out of shape, it's going to be harder for your body to kind of maintain proper oxygen levels. You're going to feel winded sooner. But it could be something as simple as your body trying to maintain your body temperature. If you're cold, for instance, it tries to raise your body temperature. If you know, or if you're too hot, then it tries to lower it. It's trying to keep a level that you need to survive. If you don't get enough, if you get too cold, you can die. If you get too hot, you can die. If you don't get enough air, you can suffocate. You know, if you don't get enough calories, you can starve to death. So the body tries to maintain, you know, a kind of a level which it is basically used to, and that's homeostasis. There's also something known as allostasis. All of you have probably heard of homeostasis, but what about allostasis? Think of allostasis like homeostasis over time. Okay, homeostasis has to do with your body trying to maintain a balance that it needs to survive, but at a given moment. Allostasis is your body adjusting over time, over years or over decades. So allostasis is dynamic body adjustment that affects overall physiology over time. So homeostasis requires an immediate response, right? You know, your body's trying to get enough air, for instance, or you're trying to keep warm because it's cold, right? Homeostasis requires an immediate response from the body, but allostasis refers to long-term adjustment, right? Where your body tries to adjust over the long term, okay, due to the demands that you may place on the body. And we'll talk about some of those in a moment and what they do to you. Allostatic load is the stresses on the body that build up over time and can harm overall function, like increases in hypertension. You know, could be due to stress, could be due to improper diet, but basically, you know, you have if you have hypertension, that means your blood pressure is too high, okay? Or obesity, you've developed obesity over time. You kept gaining weight, and you develop diabetes. These are things that happen over time, okay? Your body is trying to basically cope with the demands of, whatever demands you place on your body, maybe stress, overeating, or lack of sleep. There's all kinds of things that we do to ourselves, improper diet. And over time, your allostatic load is basically the stresses that harm your body, that build up over time. And here's more information about that. Load and balancing. So every emerging adult sometimes sleeps too little and is tired the next day. That's homeostasis, right? You didn't sleep enough the night before, so the next day you're tired and you feel like going to sleep, and maybe you don't go to work, or maybe you go to bed earlier, right? That's kind of homeostasis. The body's tired and it's telling you, you need some more rest. You need to sleep a little bit more. And, if you listen to your body, then you take a nap, you go to sleep earlier, right? You rest. You're not at your best. You don't work that hard the next day. You take it easy a little bit. But years of poor sleep habit, right? If you deprive yourself of sleep over time, over years, that will actually reduce your years of life. You'll die sooner, okay? That's allostatic load. That's allostasis, right? Over time, you're damaging your body. Your body's trying to keep up, right? But over time, you're damaging your body and you're shortening your life. There's a lot of things that will basically build up over time. So for instance, things that, increases in appetite, for instance, increases in weight, increases in depression, increases in accidents, injuries, and things like that. Over time, those build up and can shorten your life. But also there can be decreases in energy, decreases in alertness, decreases in health, and in life expectancy. All that has to do with allostatic load. Basically, things that build up over time. You can build up, more blood pressure, more weight, more appetite, more accidents, more injuries. You can have reduced energy, reduced alert, reduced health, or reduced life expectancy over time, all due to allostatic load. So allostasis is basically like homeostasis, but over time. And yes, things build up over time. You need to take care of yourself and not abuse your body. It will catch up with you in the end. Okay, later on, it will catch up with you. And you'll be weaker and sicker and more likely to die later on. Looking good, okay? So more about growth and strength. Most emerging adults look vital and attractive. Most of them look pretty good, okay? That's you guys right now. You're in college, right? You're at this period of time, most of you. I know some of you are probably a little bit older, okay? But most of you are in this period of time when you look really good for the most part. Most of you look good. A lot of you may not think so because you're comparing yourself to other people that are at, other people that are about your age. But compare yourselves to people who are older, people like me, or people who are even older, and you'll see you look pretty damn good compared to them. Okay, even me, I look tired all the fucking time. Right? I'm sorry to cuss about that, but I look tired all the time because I'm older. Okay, and you just don't look as good when you're older. You look more tired. Your skin sags a little bit more. During this time, you look good. Yeah, I said the F word there. It kind of annoys me that I do look tired all the time. I don't have to look tired, but it's something that has to do with the eyes, right? They age, right? And some people develop more bags under their eyes or dark circles more easier than others. Some people still look pretty good even when they're older. But this is the time when you're going to look your best, okay? You're at your best during this time as far as how good looking you're going to be, okay? And many emerging adults they may not think so, but they have a lot of vanity. There's a lot of vanity about personal appearance. They don't readily admit it, but you can see it, right? The way they dress, the way they wear their hair and the makeup and all the different things. They want to make sure they look good, right? They're attracted to, to fashion and glamorous celebrities. They want to look like those celebrities on TV. They want to wear the latest fashion, and that's vanity, right? You post pictures of yourself on Facebook and Twitter or whatever the heck you're using because things keep changing, right? And it's about you showing off. Oh, look at me here, look at me there, right? And you post the pictures in which you look your best. And I know that in Facebook and Twitter, so I've seen those pictures. And I've seen some people, students and stuff in person and on Facebook. And I know you guys do things to make yourselves look even better in social media. And I know most of you don't look as good as you look. as good as you look in social media, but you use filters, or this happens to be a very good picture, but you don't really look like that. It just happened to be a very good picture taken at for some reason you look very good in that picture, right? But that's the vanity, right? We want to look good. We want to show other people that we're basically good looking and young and vital and all this stuff and sexually attractive. Exercise is motivated mostly by the desire to look fit and attractive. That's why most people exercise, because they want to look good. And there's a lot of exercise, you know, during this time. This is when most people are likely to exercise. They want to look good. Even those that don't exercise look relatively okay, look relatively good. You don't have to exercise, but a lot of people still do because they want to look really good. Appearance concern may be connected to sex drive or to seeking employment. Yeah, you want to look good because you want to be sexually attractive to people. You want people to like you, and you want to attract a desirable mate. But also you want to look good because, you know, you have a job, and you want to look good at your job as well. You're around other people. And yes, if you look good and you wear the right clothes and present yourself in the right way, you're more likely to get the job. So yes, there's a lot of vanity. Staying healthy. Okay, so how do you stay healthy, right? Well, activity, right? You know, this is a time when, of course, a lot of people do, you know, try to do things to stay healthy. So they engage in activity. There's aerobic exercise. That's the kind of exercise that's like jogging, you know, cycling, bike riding, the kind of exercise that really gets gets your blood flowing, right? There's increased respiration. That's why it's called aerobic. There's increased breathing. And then there's muscle strengthening, right? Lifting weights, right? Doing squats, things like that. That's anaerobic. That doesn't really increase your heart rate so much, doesn't really increase your breathing so much, but you're exercising. It's called anaerobic. You need to eat well, right? At every stage of life, diet affects future development. If you eat well here, you'll be better off down the road. If you don't, you'll be worse off, okay? Eating well affects you at all stages of life. Your set point is a certain body weight that a person's homeostasis process strives to maintain. So your set point is the weight at which that your body's used to. It could be a low weight, could be a normal weight, it could be a high weight, it could be that you're obese and that's what your body's used to. It's whatever body weight your body is used to. It tries to maintain that. It doesn't want you to lose weight too quickly or gain weight too quickly. So if you try to lose weight and you do it too quickly, your body's going to fight you. It tries to maintain that set point. That's homeostasis. It will actually lower your metabolism so you don't lose too much weight. And if you try to gain weight too quickly, let's say because you want to get muscular, you're too thin, you want to work out and be buff or whatever it is, and you try to gain weight too quickly, your body will actually speed up your metabolism so you don't gain weight too quickly. The body tries to maintain a certain level, and it's very hard to break out of that. Okay, it's just whatever your body's used to. If you're overweight and you've been that way for years, it's going to be hard for you to get to a healthy weight. You can get there, but then your body's going to fight you and you're going to be right back where you started for the most part, because it tries to maintain a certain level, a certain weight that it's used to. But you need to keep at it, and eventually you will achieve a new set point. If you maintain it basically for for years, okay, you can get your body used to a new set point. My set point used to be at about 155, 157, around there. Started bike riding, started jogging some years ago. I don't know how many it's been. It might have been about 3-5 years since I've done it. And now my set point is around 145, and that's where my body stays for the most part. A little bit higher, a little bit lower, but right around there. I've achieved a new set point. And I didn't mean to. I didn't want to lose weight. I started exercising to basically deal with stress, okay? Your body mass index, one way to calculate that, your weight in kilograms divided by your height in meters squared. There's other ways to calculate BMI. You can look at charts on the internet. There are scales that also calculate your BMI where you can step on them barefoot and they won't only tell you your weight. There's some that will shoot an electric current through your body and tell you your BMI. Your BMI is basically an approximation of how much body fat you have. If your BMI is 30, that means you're obese, and that means you have approximately 30% body fat, which is way too much, okay? 18.5 or less is considered underweight. Between 19 and about 25, around there. If you're in that, I mean, below 25, like below 18.5, you're in the normal range. About 50% of adults are within the normal range during this time, have normal BMI between about, between about like 19 and 24, right around there. Between 18.5 and 25, if you want to, use every single percentage there. What about sex and emerging adulthood, right? 18 to 25, hey, you're an adult, right? Parents can't stop you anymore. They can try, but they really can't, right? So the sexual reproductive system is especially vigorous during this time. Yes, emerging adults are usually out there, right? They're very active sexually, having lots of sex, and the body is very capable during this time. Sexual reproductive characteristics are produced by peak sex hormones. By this time, your sex hormones have peaked, and you look like a man, you look like a woman, you look like you're capable of reproduction. You have the features that make you attractive to the opposite sex. Some people are attracted to the same sex, but they're still attracted to the same features. But yeah, you look pretty good during this time, and you're sexually very attractive, right? And the sex drive is powerful, right? During this time, right? Most people are very capable of sex, and infertility is rare. There's very few people who are infertile and can't reproduce. Okay, orgasms are frequent, right? Birth is easy during this time, right? Fewer complications, right, in the early 20s than any other time. The best time to have a child, if you're a woman, is in your 20s. It's the best time for your body. It might not be the best time for you overall, right? You may not be ready psychologically. You may not be ready financially. You may not even be married, but your body, that's the best time for you to have children. It's when it's basically the healthiest, the strongest, and the best time, when it's better able to cope with birth, which is a very, very traumatic thing, by the way. Okay, so that's when the body can cope with it best. Peak survival rate for newborns occurs when mothers are 18 to 25. Yeah, if you have kids during this time, your baby is more likely to be born healthy and alive. If you have children later, your baby's more likely to have problems. Doesn't mean they will, but the chances of deformities, abnormalities, stillbirths, all kinds of things, they go up little by little as you age, and then they increase dramatically when you start getting older in your 40s. The chances increase dramatically that you're going to have a problem. There's something going to be wrong with your child. Okay. Before this, of course, remember, teenage pregnancy, there are risk complications with that. So this is the best time, about 18 to 25. That's when your body, best time for your body, but you might not be ready. Me and my wife, of course, we weren't ready during that time. We were still going to college, didn't have a stable career yet, and we waited and started. Let me see. My daughter is my wife was like 30 when we had our first child. We had another one, and that's about it. So it was like 30 and like 32. Okay, I was even older. I was like 33 and 35. When we first had our children. But your 20s is biologically the best time. Let's talk more about sex. Historically, most babies born to women, historically in the past, most babies were born to women that were under 25. People got married earlier and they had kids earlier back then. They were usually married by about age 20, and they had many children. Back then, people had more kids. Okay. Today, many emerging adults prefer premarital sex, right, with reliable birth control. In other words, they prefer to have sex without, the possibility of having children. So them just will have sex without looking to actually start a family, right? That's sex for pleasure, or sex just because you're in a relationship, not really for having kids. Okay, it's not always meant to have children. In the past, when people had sex, it was because they were ready to have kids. Okay, advances in contraception, right, have reduced the birth rate and also have increased the rate of sexual activity. Because we have contraception, there's less people being born now. Okay, less births per family. The average now is like 2.5. And you might be thinking, how can you have 2.5 children? What that means is that some families might have 3, some might have 2, some might have 1, but the average is about 2.5. In the past, it was higher. People had more kids. And people, because of contraception and birth control now, people are having more sex more often before marriage. Okay, because we have contraception. In the past, when there was no contraception, you had sex. It basically means you were probably going to get pregnant. And, people had to be more careful. Now you don't have to be as careful, I guess. You can have sex and you're not necessarily going to get pregnant. It still happens. You can still get pregnant, but the chances are slim, okay? You have like, you know, the 90-something% chance, depending on which birth control you use, that you're not going to get pregnant. Most people will have sex, even unprotected sex, over and over again. If the woman's on the pill or on something, you know, some form of birth control, and most of them won't have, you know, an unwanted pregnancy, even though they're having sex. And that's because of contraception. There's many forms of it. Condom use is one of those forms, right? But that wouldn't be, that would be protected sex. But you can still get pregnant, even if the guy uses a condom, by the way. It's just that the chances are slimmer, okay? Most likely you will not, but it can still happen. Globally, emerging adults have fewer babies, right? But engage in more sexual activity. I think I said that already. Yeah, we're kind of repeating the same thing there. Opinions and problems. There are problems, you know, that have to do with sex. There are sexually transmitted infections. It's what it's called nowadays. We used to call them STD, sexually transmitted diseases. Now it's called sexually transmitted infections. A lot of them are infections and they can be treated. So the sexually transmitted infection rate has reached epidemic proportions. We have a lot of people infected now. A lot of people with herpes. A lot of people with all sorts of things. There is better treatment now. There's still no cure for herpes. We'll talk about some things. But yeah, there's a lot of people out there, you know. I'll put it to you this way, okay? If you have unprotected sex, chances are you're gonna get herpes, okay? That's how widespread it is. But for most people, it's not that much of a problem. For some people it is, and they get outbreaks more often. Most people hardly get them at all. But some people have more problems with it. But just have unprotected sex with a couple of people, right? 2, 3, chances are one of them is gonna have herpes, okay? And you're gonna get it. That's how common it is, okay? There's other things, of course. There's chlamydia, you know, we'll talk about those things. Half of all new cases worldwide occur in people younger than 26. Half of all new infections that are occurring are in people who are younger than 26, basically, young people having sex. The best prevention, right, is lifelong monogamy. You want to not get an STI, right? Stick with one person for your whole life, right? Most adults agree that they should have sex with only one person, but one person at a time, okay? Because emerging adults practice serial monogamy. What happens is you're with one person, relationship gets serious, you start having sex, and then at some point you break up, okay? And then you start a relationship with somebody else, and you have sex with that person and somebody else, and then you'll have multiple sexual relationships before you actually settle down, or even when you do settle down, you get married, it could still, half of the time it won't work out, and then you'll have sex with somebody else. So that's serial monogamy, one person at a time, but many persons over your lifetime. That's the way it is for most people. Very few people will have one person in their lifetime, but that if you only have one person in your whole lifetime, that will dramatically decrease the chance that you're going to get some sexually transmitted infection. But you can get it from the first person you have sex with. Okay, if the chances are high, not super high, but let's just say that the first person you have sex with, right? There's at least a 33% chance that that one person is going to give you something. It depends on the person, okay? But it's been estimated that, you know, about like at least 1/3 to about half the population probably has herpes, just to give you an example of that. Worldwide, globalization fuels every contagious disease, including AIDS and HIV. Okay, yes, AIDS has spread around the world, HIV, herpes, all these things. Now I mean, it's not a sexually transmitted disease, but right now we're currently facing another virus that is spreading, right? People fly all over the world and they go here and there and diseases spread, right? In the past, when we didn't have airplanes, we couldn't travel very far. Disease broke out somewhere, it couldn't really spread that much. Nowadays, it spreads very easily. And yes, there are people flying and traveling all over the world and spreading all sorts of diseases everywhere. What about premarital sex? So perceptions of premarital sex. Is it acceptable to have sex before you're married? Here are some statistics for you guys. Percentage of adults of all ages who believe premarital sex is wrong, okay? In Europe, only about, let's say like 10% believe premarital sex is wrong. So 90% of people in Europe, according to this survey, said that premarital sex is okay. In the US, about 30% believe it's wrong, and about 70% believe it's okay. Okay, in Asia, you know, more than 60% believe it's wrong. In Africa, more, you know, close to 80% believe it's wrong. In the Middle East, you know, it's about 90% believe it's wrong. What does this have to do with, right? What is this really telling you here? And by the way, in the US, we're kind of hypocritical here. A bunch of people believe that you shouldn't have sex before you're married, but they still do. Most people still do. The vast majority, 90-something% will still have sex. I'm almost close to 100%, right? It's rare that somebody makes it all the way to marriage without having sex in the US. But a lot of people still believe it's wrong, even though they can't help themselves. In other countries, right, they believe it's wrong as well. That doesn't mean that that you're necessarily gonna have more people there who you are probably going to have more people there who will make it to marriage without having sex, but a lot of them will still have sex before that. Okay, it's just, this is the belief. What people do is something else. I will tell you something here that my opinion here, from what I see here and what I've seen about countries that believe that premarital sex is wrong. There's a correlation here between the percentage of people who believe that premarital sex is wrong and oppression of women. The more people believe that that premarital sex is wrong, the more women are oppressed in those countries, because it's a way to control women, is really what it is. No, you can't have sex until you're married. It's mostly a rule for women and not so much for men. And the more you liberate people, the more freedom people have, the more they're gonna basically have sex before they're married. And that's what you see in countries where they're very strict, right? Women are very oppressed, and their premarital sex, they believe, is really wrong, and how dare you, and if you do it, they might even kill you, but it's always the woman who gets punished. Where there's more oppression of women, there's less sexual freedom, if you want to think of it that way. Okay? Sorry to tell you guys that, right? For those of you who may believe otherwise, but sex has a lot to do with oppression, okay? And freedom is the opposite, okay? Just so you know. There's a lot to that, okay? Take a human sexuality class and you'll see that a lot about this stuff has to do with just control and oppression, okay? Psychopathology, there is emotional stress that comes with coping with a lot of things that happen during emerging adulthood, things that have to do with sex. Current sexual patterns may cause emotional stress as relationships begin and end, right? You might feel stressed, anxious, right? Your partner is expecting sex, but you don't want to have sex yet. You're not ready. You might be stressed because you don't want to have sex, or maybe you're stressed because you want to have sex already, but your partner's not ready. There can be stress about that. So stress about attitudes and the purpose of sex as well, right? Attitudes, when is it okay to have sex? Is it okay to have sex before marriage and all that stuff, right? The purpose of sex, why do we have sex, right? Yes, it's for reproduction, but it's also because, you know, part of a relationship. It's also part of recreation. A lot of people have sex just to have fun, just because it feels good. And people feel stressed or anxious about these things. Should I do it? Should I not do it? When is it okay? You know, only in a relationship or only when I get married, that kind of stuff. And people kind of worry about these things and feel anxious about it. Eventually what happens is it happens and you get used to it and you don't feel so bad about it anymore. But you do have conflict at times, and you feel stressed out about what you're doing or what you should be doing and that kind of stuff. There's also, you can also experience stress because of the influence on assumptions about the purpose of sex, right? Things have to do with religion and religious belief, right? There's a lot of talk there about sex when it comes to religion, right? That you're not supposed to have sex before you're married. You're not supposed to have sex for pleasure, right? It's only so you can have kids, only when you're married, right? And if you're very religious, they're going to put pressure on you and not to do that. There are some churches, some places that they even go as far as forbidding you to have sex with someone outside the church. You're not allowed to have sex, period, right? They don't want you to have sex at all, and they discourage that. But even when you date, they want you to date someone within that very same church, not even the same religion, that same church. And they have a lot of control over the congregation, but the people who are in that congregation willingly give control. And that's what it's about, by the way. It's about control, is really what it's about, right? They're trying to tell you what you can and cannot do with your body, okay? And the science basically says that if you're ready emotionally, physically, and you do it responsibly, that it's okay. That's what the science says. But of course, people can have their religions, they can have their culture that will affect their decisions. But yes, for the most part, religion, culture, government, whatever you want to call it, it's there for a reason. It's there to control the population, to pass certain rules and laws so people don't do whatever the heck they want. And religion is a part of that, that helps control the population. Here in the US, religion doesn't have as much control as it used to, but in other countries, there's a lot, okay? It still has a lot of influence, a lot of control. But all that is part of the things that you have to cope with, the stress, the anxiety over sex, okay? Other things that have to do with stress, things have to more do with psychopathology problems you may have. There are multiple stresses that emerging adults can face. So they're very healthy physically, okay? But they can face problems psychologically. Most emerging adults experience actually fewer stresses. Usually during this time, their self-esteem is higher. They feel pretty good about themselves. Suicidal threats are less common. So don't get me wrong. Most adults are not just physically, but also psychologically healthy. But there are plenty of adults who will have problems during this time. And we're going to talk about those. Most don't. Most feel good about themselves. Most of them are not depressed. Okay. Most of them are not suicidal. Okay. But plenty of them will still have problems. The demands of emerging adulthood can cause psychopathology. They can cause psychological problems. For some, when there's an added pre-existing vulnerability, some people are just genetically more predisposed to become depressed, for instance, to become anxious, to get stressed out or develop other problems. The diathesis stress model is the view that mental disorders are produced by the interaction of genetics, diathesis, and stressful environment and life events. So it's a combination between what is happening biologically and what is happening in the environment. Those two things combine to cause the psychological disorders. If you have a tendency, more of a predisposition, because maybe you're more sensitive, more of a tendency to get depressed, and then bad things happen to you, you're more likely to be depressed. You have a tendency for, let's say, anxious, you're just a little bit more high strung naturally, biologically, you're more likely to get stressed out by, and just dealing with everyday things that you have to deal with during emerging adulthood. And let's talk about psychopathology a bit more. So emerging adults experience more of every diagnosed psychological disorder than any other group. So emerging adults are the ones that experience psychological problems the most. Keep in mind, though, that most of them are healthy and most of them do not really have problems, though. But this is when you're most likely to have problems. Sexual freedom can cause anxiety, depression, drug use, disease, right? There's a lot of things that come with that sexual freedom, right? A lot of things that come with freedom in general. You're an adult, right? And now you can probably date and go out and have sex if you want to. Your parents can't stop you. They can try to influence you, but they can't really stop you. You may not even be living at home, okay? Maybe you're off to college, or you have an apartment your own. You have your own place to live, right? You have all this freedom. With that comes problems, potential problems, if you don't go about it the right way. Can cause problems, of course, depression, anxiety, drug use, right? Disease, right? You can be physically abused, sexually abused, right? With freedom comes more danger and more potential problems. Okay, you need to know what you're doing, and you need to take care of yourself. Parents are less involved, right? So they can't really stop you. They're not really there to, they may not even be there physically because you live somewhere else. They're not there to give you a bad look. You're less likely to do this stuff if you're living with your parents, right? Even if you're an adult, but they can't really stop you either way. Gainful employment is not guaranteed. Yes, a lot of young adults during this time don't have jobs. And when they do, they tend to have jobs that don't pay very well. And that's part of the stress, right? Of just trying to cope, trying to have enough money to get by, right? You're an adult, you're supposed to take care of yourself, but it's hard to get a good job when you're young and inexperienced, and you may not have the education that's required. Most emerging adults don't really have good jobs. A lot of them don't even have jobs. Stress or freedom across domains may increase or protect from vulnerability. No, stress or strength, right? Some people cope very well with these challenges, and they get stronger and more resilient, right? And are better adjusted. And some people don't cope very well and get distressed, get anxious, and may be more vulnerable to drug use and other problems. It's part of growing up. It's a dangerous time, but most people deal with it quite well. Okay, here's some problems. Okay, depressive disorder. So depression. Okay, so before they reach 30 years of age, about 8% of U.S. residents suffer from major depression. About 8% will be depressed before the age of 30. Okay, and here's some symptoms: loss of interest, difficulties with sleeping, difficulty concentrating, changes in eating habits, right? Usually they lose their appetite. Sometimes they overeat, Changes with friendships. You no longer want to hang out with people anymore. You want people to leave you alone, right? You don't feel hopeful anymore. It can be biochemical. There can be a chemical imbalance in the brain, right? And a lot of emerging adults will not get treatment. Most of them will not seek treatment, even though they need it. Okay, a lot of them need treatment, but most of them will not seek treatment. I experienced depression during this time. I didn't seek treatment, and it caused me a lot of problems. Eventually, I got better, but things could have been a lot better for me had I sought help. Okay, but that's a very common thing. About 8% of US residents will have depression, will have experienced depression before the age of 30. The social costs of depression are higher than most physical illnesses. There's a lot of social costs. It undercuts accomplishments in education. You're more likely to fail and drop out of college, drop out of school if you're depressed. Your vocational choices, it'll limit your vocational choices. If you're depressed and you suffer academically, right? Or if you're just depressed, you may not even want to look for a job. You want people to leave you alone, okay? It will damage your romantic involvement. It will damage your relationships, okay? Or make it harder for you to find a relationship because you withdraw from people. It will affect your employment, your productivity at work, all those things. Depressed people basically have a harder time with just about everything. It's hard to do the things you normally do or the things you could do if you are depressed. What about anxiety disorders? Anxiety problems, okay? Stress in general. A lot of people develop anxiety disorders. The symptoms of anxiety disorders are shaped by age and genetic vulnerability. Yeah, some people are just more prone to be anxious than others and develop disorders. The image there that you see at the upper right, that's someone who has obsessive compulsive disorder. Look at all the papers and things scattered everywhere, right? That's a symptom of that. I've seen that in my own wife, by the way. She has OCD, okay? And she overworks herself and she has things everywhere and papers and books everywhere. She's a teacher and it's just like, oh my God, it's just every now and then she has a need to reorganize and there's just a bunch of stuff everywhere, okay? Stress disorders, anxiety disorders come in many forms. It can include panic attacks, post-traumatic stress disorder, obsessive compulsive disorder. About 1 in 4 of all US residents under age 25 will have an anxiety disorder, right? About 25% will have problems with anxiety that are so severe that it reaches the level that it's a psychological disorder. There's a lot of people who are very stressed out, very anxious out there. It's more common worldwide than depression. This is more common than depression itself. Risk-taking is also something that often happens during emerging adulthood from the ages of 18 to 25. We have an image there of someone who's a race car driver, right? Yeah, I mean, most people are not going to be able to have that kind of career as their profession. But if you are going to be a race car driver or a motorcycle racer or something like that, you start pretty young, okay? And by the time you're in your 20s, you might be pro if you're that good, right? But that's very risky. You're very likely to get injured and you can die as well. But in general, emerging adults take lots of risks. You don't have to be a famous race car driver, right? Emerging adulthood is marked by a greater willingness to take risks. There's a lot of, emerging adults during this time, they drive too fast. They party too much. They have unprotected sex. They do drugs that they know are bad. They go out and party. They go to clubs and are out there late at night, among criminals, among people who can do them harm, but they think nothing's going to happen to them. There's a lot of risky behavior that occurs during this time. Extreme risk-taking is not necessarily pathological. It is normal. A lot of emerging adults take a lot of risks, but there can be a lot of accidents. People get into car accidents and they get killed and injured. Okay, it happens a lot. Drunk driving too fast, right? Homicides, people getting killed and murdered, right? People, committing suicide, right? Those are the leading causes of death among people aged 15 to 25. Accidents, homicides, suicides. That's likely to get you when you're 15 to 25. If you die during that time, those are the top 3 things. Very risky behavior, basically. You're taking a lot of chances and you're not protecting yourself. You'll see when you get older, you're not going to take all those risks. You're not going to act the same way when you're older. I don't act the same way anymore. I'm in my 40s now. I'm not partying out there, getting drunk out of my mind anymore. You know, hanging out with strangers, you know, not driving too fast anymore, having unprotected sex, doing all this stuff. I never really did drugs, you know, but it's a time when we engage in more risk taking. When you get older, you'll realize that, damn, what the heck was I doing? Why was I so stupid? I'm lucky nothing happened to me, right? But yeah, you'll be different when you're older. The accident hump occurs at about age 20. By about age 20, that's when you're most likely to have accidents. And after that, you're less likely to have accidents. It has a lot to do, I think, with experience driving. You know, when you first start driving, and especially when you're young, you tend to drive too fast and you tend to do stupid things, you know, like being, you know, under the influence of drugs, or you're with your friends in the car. When people are with friends in the car, they drive too fast. You know, you do a lot of stupid things when you're young, okay? That's why it's called emerging adulthood. You're not really an adult yet. You're not acting like an adult. The emerging adults are the most common killers and victims. Think about that. If somebody kills you, it's more likely going to be someone who's in this age group, 18 to 25, who's going to kill you. Or if you kill someone, you're more likely in this age group, right? It's actually a very dangerous time. A lot of people taking a lot of risks out there. Some of the risky behavior involves drug abuse, drug use in general. A lot of people use drugs during this time. And some of them develop substance abuse disorder. That's ingestion of a drug to the extent that it impairs the user's biological or physiological well-being. A lot of people use drugs, okay, but most of them don't really have a drug problem. But those that have substance abuse disorder, those are the ones who basically use drugs, and they use drugs to the extent that basically they don't function normally. They get very drunk and they don't take care of themselves, or you know, basically they're addicted to drugs and they can't be happy without the drugs. You know, they're more likely to overdose and die, more likely to engage in risky behavior. The drugs basically are ruining their lives, ruining their relationships, causing problems at work if they have work, right? It's causing physical problems and they're addicted, right? That's when you have substance abuse disorder, where you use drugs to the extent that it's impairing you. If you just use a little weed every now and then and no big deal, right? Or you drink some alcohol, you know, on a social occasion like I do, right? You know, that's not a problem. But if you're a heavy drug user or you use it habitually, you do it all the time, you probably have a problem, and it's probably causing you problems. At school, you're probably not doing as well as you could be. Or school is harder than it should be because you're drunk, you're high, you're stoned, or whatever you want to call it. You're not doing the things that you should do. At work, at school, your relationships, it will cause you lots of problems. Substance use disorder is recognized as a psychological disorder in the DSM-5. It's actually considered a psychological disorder now. Substance use disorder, people who basically use drugs to the extent that, you know, they have problems and they have trouble coping. The determining factor is the potential for harm, right? Are you using drugs to the extent that it's causing you harm? And it's not just physically, psychologically, your relationships, your work, your school, all that stuff, right? It's not necessarily the dose or the specific substance. It's whether it's causing you harm. If you can use drugs and you're doing fine in life, in school, your relationships are fine, work is fine, all that stuff, then you don't really have a problem. But if you're doing drugs and, you know, and you're not studying as much as you should, you're procrastinating or you're failing, you're not doing well, you have problems with your relationships because of the drugs at work or whatever it is, then you have a problem. And here's the thing, a lot of people that use drugs will have problems. Drug use makes things harder for you. It does. It's another stupid thing that you do that's getting in the way of you living a normal life, of you doing as best as you could do. But doing a little bit here and there just to relax is okay. But if you do it habitually, you probably have a problem. It's causing you to make decisions different decisions that you would make in your life. Self-identification as abuser rather than user can be problematic. There's a lot of people who basically say that they use drugs, but they don't abuse them. They say they don't have problems and they won't admit to the problems. MDMA is just one example of one of these drugs that people use. They use it to party and stuff like that. And they say they use it, but they don't really have a problem, or alcohol, whatever it is. Most people who have drug problems are in denial and they say, oh no, I don't have a drug problem. I can stop whenever I want. No, they can't. They're addicted and they don't even know it. Alcohol, marijuana, some examples of some drugs here. Both alcohol and marijuana abuse is more common among college students than other emerging adults. So during emerging adulthood, you're very likely to use alcohol, marijuana. College students are even more likely to do that stuff, okay? Binge drinking rate, right? Binge drinking is basically when you drink and you drink like 5 or 6 drinks in a row. You're not drinking to get buzzed, you're drinking to get drunk. That's binge drinking, okay? About 30% of college students engage in that behavior. 28% for non-college students. So when you're in college, you're more likely to party and drink too much than if you're not in college. More likely with college men living with peers, right? If you're part of fraternity, for instance, you're more likely to engage in binge drinking. It's just part of what fraternities do. Less likely with women living with their parents. You're less likely to basically engage in binge drinking if you're living at home and you're a woman. Because you know your dad and your mom are gonna look at you and they're gonna know, and they don't even have to say much, but just a look will be enough to discourage you. Or the fact that they can find out, you're less likely to do it than if you live away from home. It varies historically and culturally with age. Yeah, historically, certain drugs have been more popular than others, and the popular drugs kind of change, right? Alcohol has always been very popular. Marijuana is very popular now, used to be less popular, but other drugs kind of come and go. It varies culturally, right? Among some cultures, some ethnic groups, certain drugs are just more popular than others. And with age, you're more likely to use drugs during this time than when you're older. This is a time when there's a lot of risk taking. And here's a graph to show you the extent of drug use, certain drugs over time. You can see the red there, cigarette smoking, which is another risky behavior, by the way. It doesn't matter that it's legal, right? Cigarettes are going to shorten your life, okay? You can see how it rises, in like late adolescence and peaks, in your basically in your 20s, and then declines after your mid 30s. Any drug use is the green. You can see how it kind of peaks early, 18 to around 25, around there, and then declines. And then we have alcohol. It goes up until your mid 20s, then starts to decline slowly, and then declines more so later on. So the point is, you're more likely to use drugs when you're young.